Hello guys, I'm a woodcarver and reenactor, and today I want to try to make slightly different video than usual. I got a very interesting order recently. I had to work with new materials, and I think that some of my experience and thoughts could be interesting for some of you. So let's start. I'm a full-time woodcarver for like 4 years now, and I was doing it before that for a couple of years maybe. So this order was unusual for me because the customer asked me to make something out of bone. We had been talking about it with him before, so it wasn't a surprise for me. But still, that's quite a challenge. So he asked me to make a few spoons out of bone. It can seem like not that difficult task, but when you're working with a new material for the first time, you have some problems to solve. Wood carving and bone carving in general are really ancient crafts, and I think they were present since Paleolithic age or something. I've seen in a museum really ancient finds from all periods of time, and during the Viking Age too. There are a lot of finds made of bone and antler. And one more thing to consider is that items made of bone and antler are much better preserved in the soil than the wooden ones. That's why we have a lot of finds made of these materials. And the forms and ornaments of these items are really fascinating. And that's the main reason why I wanted to start working with bone and antler. So finally I have the order and can try myself in bone carving, but here come the problems. How should I prepare the bone before carving? Should I use bone or antler? And will my usual woodworking tools work on the bone and antler? And these problems I have to solve. And let's see what I came up with. So here we are, looking at my workbench, and there are 3 examples of different materials here. That's wood, that's bone, cow bone, and antler, moose antler. And I'll try to make a small comparison between these 3 based on my experience in woodworking and my new experience in bone carving and antler carving. And let's start from the beginning. How do you get your materials ready for carving? You can usually buy wooden boards. Here we have one. Big, thick, 5 cm maple board. You can get these boards on the wood market. They have different thicknesses, different length and width. Usually they are 3 or 5 cm thick. Sometimes you can get 7 or even 8 for the beech wood if you are very lucky. Or sometimes you can get access to the green wood and get yourself some sort of round blank. Usually they are really wet, or you can buy yourself a dry one if somebody can dry it for you and sell dry wooden blanks. But if you need specific type of wood, so you usually get green wood and have to dry it yourself. And that's quite a job. It's a really difficult one. You have to know how to do it right. So when you have your dry piece of wood ready, you just take any saw you have, go and cut it in any piece you need, and you are nearly ready to carve. You can use all sorts of chisels, carving tools, planes, and all that stuff. I think everyone knows how to do it, and you don't need any explanation. But that's the different story when we come to the bone. As you can see, that's the blank of the cow bone ready for carving. And actually I have already cut out the piece for my spoon. And it's not really easy to get such a blank. And it all starts on the meat market, where you can get yourself a bone. It can be a cow bone or sheep or ram bone or any type of animal bone which lives in your country. And on the meat markets, all these bones come absolutely raw, because people usually need them for cooking. When you got yourself a few bones, you have to remove all the meat from it. So you have to cut away these big parts, these big joints that are usually here. Maybe they are smaller if you have a smaller bone. Remove all the meat from it, and then let it boil for a few hours. Usually it's like 2 or 3 and then another 2 or 3. I won't make an instructional video. There are a lot of them on YouTube. I'll just make a small overview. Also, I wasn't filming this process because YouTube doesn't like raw meat in the not cooking videos, I guess. So we should boil the bones a few times with changing water, and the next step is degreasing the bone. I'm not sure if degrease is the right word, but you have to remove all the fats from the bone. I use sodium carbonate for that, like this one. It's usually used for washing and cleaning. You have to add this stuff in the water and boil the bones again for a few hours. This blank is absolutely ready, but maybe you can see, where is it, that here there are some remains of the inside part of the bone. I'm not sure you can see that. Here it is. Yeah, something like that. That's the remains of the spongy part, which can cover nearly all the surface on these sides of the bone. Focus, please. Nearly all these parts of the bone can be covered with this spongy part, and sodium carbonate helps to remove it. This spongy part will be dark on the raw bone, and when you boil it in sodium carbonate, it will be whitening slowly. And when it becomes white, you can remove it with your knife. Just scrape it away like that. Because there is a lot of fat in this spongy part, and if you don't do that, all this fat can go up the bone, and you won't be able to remove this fat. So when all the fat is removed from the bone, you can whiten it. As you can see, this bone is whitened and it is nearly white. Sorry for that. But if you don't do that, the bone will be a bit yellowish. That's quite a beautiful color, but with time it will become more and more yellow, and well, that's just to your choice. I have whitened the bone, and the final result is... I like the final result. I used urea peroxide for whitening. You can get it in the drugstore. Also, you can use hydrogen peroxide for whitening, but it works a bit more aggressively, so I don't think that's the best option, but I haven't tried it for this specific type of job. So only after this boiling, whitening and drying the bone, it's ready for carving. You can see how the process differs compared to the wood. But after all the steps are done, you get really high quality material. And finally, let's move to the antler. Here it is. That's just a small part of moose antler. I think that's the material which need the least preparation, but only if you don't take into account getting the antler from the deer or moose or whatever animal. You don't actually need to hunt to get antler, because deer and moose, they throw away their antler when it's big enough. I'm not sure at what age they do that, but I know that you can find antler in the woods. Or you can just go and buy antler. I had one and had to buy another one, because you need specific parts of antler to make some items. So all you have to do is just to find yourself an antler somewhere. I also have this big one, that's the second one that I bought actually. I just have cut away a few pieces. So you can cut antler right after you got yourself a piece. And let's move to the tools which you can use for carving. As I have already said, you can use all kinds of woodworking tools like chisels, planes and all that stuff for wood. We all know what you need. And it's slightly more complicated when it comes to the bone and antler, because they are much harder than wood. Actually, I have found out that bone and antler are quite similar in terms of structure, hardness and toughness. I'll try to show you what I mean. The thing is that this part of antler is nearly similar to the bone. I'll try to show you. we have the same spongy part as we had on the bone. This part is not that great and doesn't make a good surface. You still can kind of use it, but it's not the best quality part. So you have really good parts that are like bone here, and the parts which are worse, they're here. And sometimes this spongy part can be really bad, like here. I'll try to show you again. Here it is. This spongy part spoils all the material, so you can't use it. I was trying to do something with it. Here is one of the blanks which I decided not to use because of this part. You can see it's bending and it's quite soft part, so it's poor quality material. Yeah, now it's in focus, but I think you get what I mean. That's a better quality material, and I think you don't have to use it for anything. So the quality of the material is different in every part of the antler, and that's the main difficulty when working with it. So there are really high quality parts here. I'll try to show you. We have a lot of this bone-like material, and it changes all over the antler. And here is one more interesting thing. Actually, I can show you how the whitening works with antler. I have already said that I whitened the bone, and I did the same with some parts of the antler, with some spoons which I have made out of it. And here we have a few examples. This blank is whitened, and this one is not. So hopefully you can see that this one is nearly white and have only little spot, on a little darker spot here, when this one is just dark. There is a big spot all over it. And actually this one had this too. I'm not sure if you can see it. The light is not that great. It had the same dark spot all over it. So that's how the whitening works. And finally, let's move to the tools you can use for bone carving and antler carving. And let's start with sawing, because first of all you have to get the main shape of the item you are making. The spoon, for example. At first I was using this kind of saw. It is used for working with metal, but it cuts bone and antler quite well. And I've cut this bone using just this saw. And I'll show you the spoon, it was just here. So I just have made a few cuts, here, then here, and got the blank I needed. Of course that's not that convenient, because you lose lots of material. And after you have your blank, you still have to cut a lot of material from here and here. You still have to do it with a saw or with a jigsaw. And the same thing you can do with an antler. But luckily I'm a woodcarver, so I have some extra instruments. You can actually use a bandsaw for cutting antler and bone. I wasn't really sure about cutting it with a bandsaw because I thought that it can damage the blade. But after making the first spoon out of bone, I have decided to try that out, because it was really time consuming doing it by hand. I just have found an old blade for the bandsaw and have tried it out. I have made a small clip to show you. So all these beautiful cuts in the antler are made on the bandsaw. Here, here, and this one too. I don't remember if they were like that, but I think you can see these long cuts I make on the bandsaw. Bone cutters actually use circular saw for it, but I don't have it, so I can't try it out. You can actually use one more tool before starting to cut it with your knife. You can use an axe. A good sharp axe for cutting, not splitting. I have also made a clip for you. I wasn't using it that much, but I can show you how it's done. I think that in the medieval times it was one of the main tools for bone cutting. So here we can see two small pieces of bone and antler, and an old Soviet axe. Let's try to chop something. I'm not good with an axe, but let's try to do something. This axe is not even sharp and have quite a big dents, but I think you can see what it can do with the bone. Let me catch the focus here. So I think now you can see that we've made quite some damage to the bone, and you can carve it this way actually. Also you can split bone, of course, and do lots of stuff with an axe. I think you can see it. Let's try it with an antler now. Here's one. Here is a small piece, and let's try to do that. It also works quite well. And don't forget that I'm doing it with really small pieces, so I have to be accurate, and I'm not really good with it. But if you get used to it, you can do it really effectively. I think you can see what I'm talking about. That's a significant cut, and I think you can quite fastly make forms with an axe. So now we can start carving bone with all different knives you have, like this one, for example. Hopefully we can see it. Whoop. This knife is for wood carving, so I can't recommend using it, but it still works kind of alright. Of course the bone is really hard, but the knife works. I can't recommend that because I think that this angle of wood cutting knife is not optimal. It's not optimal for bone carving, and you'd better have special tools for it. That's why such kind of chisels doesn't work that well too. I was trying to do that and it worked, but I had to resharpen it after bone carving. And I'll repeat once again that I'm a novice bone carving and I usually work with wood, so all this knowledge are just my first time experience. It kind of works with antler too. Actually, slightly better. You can use all kinds of knives, but it seems to me that But it seems to me that you need slightly another angle on your knife to properly cut bone. But it still works fine and have absolutely no dents on the blade. And that's absolutely inexpensive knife. And nowadays we of course have modern ways of carving wood, bone and all these materials. And here I have one example. I'm not sure how is it called in English. Is it rotor bit? But it's not a rotor, it's just this type of a machine. But what I want to say is that this thing cuts bone. It's not grinding it, it cuts it. Let me show you. And as you can see, it's quite effective. Let's have the focus once again. And I think you can see now that it's working fast and is quite accurate. Let's try that with an antler. Here we have an old cut. And that's how this thing works. Quite fast and effective. And after the main shape of your item is ready, you of course have to make its surface smooth. Nowadays you can use sanding paper of course, or just scrape off the material, or just make really gentle cuts. So after a good cut you'll have really shiny and smooth surface. The final polishing can be done with felt wool or just woolen fabric or something like that. And here is the final result. These 3 spoons are made of antler, and this one is made of bone. So antler let us make the spoons of different forms. You can choose any form you like, nearly any of course, nearly any form you like, and you can make it out of antler. When using bone, you don't have that much freedom. All these spoons belongs to Hungarian culture. Hungarian or Magyar culture, as it's also called. Don't ask me how they're connected with Bulgaria, Volga Bulgaria. It's not really my sphere of knowledge. I know more about Viking Age and Vikings, so I can make some mistakes in the historical part. But let's make a small overview. These 2, the original ones, were found in Tankiev, not Tankiev, but in the burial mound near village Tankievka. I'll show you the sources. As you can see, both of them have nearly the same bend, so it would be easier to use them. We don't know were they made out of bone or antler, because according to the description, I will just try to catch the focus. According to the description, they should be made out of bone. But if you will look on its form, it's most likely it was most likely made out of antler or some specific bone which I couldn't find. This one has decorated handle, and as you can see, hopefully can see, antler can be polished quite well. Here we go. So we have quite a nice finish. This one is also made of antler, moose antler, but it has slightly different texture. As you can see, it's this part of antler has this spongy surface. It shouldn't affect the spoon critically, but I just had this piece of antler. But you still can use it because these parts are absolutely solid. And it doesn't affect the spoon's toughness in any way. And here is another one. It has different design and has really different bend. The description says that it was made out of bone, but I'm not sure again. We don't have enough information to prove it or say that it's not bone. I made it out of antler too because I couldn't make it out of bone. It has a really big curve. I'll show you the sources. And the source itself is not really great. One photo is absolutely not enough to make a proper replica, but we just have what we have. And I tried my best to make this spoon look as close to the original as possible. I hope it's in focus, and I'll show you its form. So it's also made out of antler, moose antler, and is polished. It doesn't have any serious problems with texture, just some small, just slightly different texture on the end. I'm not sure you can see it, but I'll try to show you. Maybe it was really made out of bone because its form is nearly okay for it to be made out of bone, but we don't know exactly what animal did they use, and was it really bone? So I did what I could and used antler to try to replicate the form of the spoon. And here is the last one. Actually, that was my first attempt to try to make this spoon, and this one is made out of bone. I'll try to show you. As usual, we have some focus problems, but excuse me for that. I'm trying to show you the texture. The bone has a really smooth texture. It's really nice to the touch. Bone is absolutely solid all the way, so you don't have these texture problems in the end or somewhere else. But you are you can't choose the form for the spoon. You just have to work with what you have. The bone is very thin, so if the bone doesn't have inside it the form you need, so you can't make the thing you need. And a few more words about the technology. As you can see, these, not these, but these three are a bit whiter than this one. It has some kind of yellowish color. That's because these three were whitened. These two are made out of moose antler, so they still have some spots. So they still have some darker spots, and that is made out of bone, so it's absolutely white, nearly absolutely. And these two were made out of one antler, and this one from another one. And these two antlers actually are quite different, because these two spoons had quite visible spots and some places where the antler was really dark, and only after whitening this three has nearly the same color, when this spoon has its natural color without whitening and is still quite white. So different antlers can have different colors. So let's try to make a small summary about wood carving and bone carving. And I actually think that they have a lot in common, because the main principles are absolutely the same. And the most difficult part for me is, of course, getting the right shape out of antler and bone blanks you have. I'm a reenactor, so I have to replicate the items of the past, and it's not that easy with the bone and antler, because you don't have that massive amount of the material which you have with wood. You don't have thick solid boards, you just have these strange roundish forms of antlers and even more complicated parts of bone. And this happened with this spoon, because the sources tell us that it was made out of bone, but there is no way you can make it out of this bone. And most likely it was an archaeologist mistake, but we don't know, because the scientists didn't pay attention to these details. And the book doesn't tell us, was it really bone or was it antler? Maybe it was just not that important for him. So I will continue working with bone and antler, because these materials have lots of potential actually. They can be greatly polished and have really nice textures. Color of the bone is absolutely amazing, and I think that different ornaments will look absolutely great on these materials. That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. Please excuse me for my rusty English, I have to practice a bit more, and my video making skills are not that great yet, but all these things will improve with time, and I will just try my best to share with you some experience I had recently. And I have learned a lot while making these spoons. So thank you very much for watching, please press likes, dislikes and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.